Yes, CR here. Alright, so one of my most popular videos so far has been one of my first videos, which was when I converted my Alienware X51 into a normal mid-tower PC. Something that I did a couple of years ago now, and something that I need to do again. I want to go through it in more detail this time and help you guys out a little bit more, because I see a lot of people have also wanted to do this, and I've had so many questions. It's been amazing. Like, this is the most feedback I've ever had on a video. I've had so much input from it, so I'm going to try and address some of those questions in my retake. So what I have here is another X51. I did used to have two, and I did convert one, but I've been using this as my main PC for the last couple of years now, and it's getting to the point where I need to upgrade. I can't play games at high anymore, not all games anyway. So I've looked at what needs to be done. So this is an Alienware X51 with 16 gigabytes of RAM. I did upgrade it from 8 gig. It's got a Intel Core i7 2600, which operates at 3.4 gigahertz. I've had a look around. The newest one is like the 4790, which you can also get operating at 3.4 gigahertz, and I've compared the two, and to be honest, there's still really not a lot of difference in it. In that I'm going to keep the 2600 for now. When I can get a good 15% performance boost, I'll buy a new processor. But at the moment, this processor is still pretty much on par with the latest ones. There hasn't been a lot of development in processing power at the moment, unless you want to go ahead and spend like £800 on a processor, which is something that I'm not willing to do. So I'm not going to pay £300 to £400 on an upgrade that's only going to give me 5 to 10% performance increase. And I've had a look at the specifics, and the 2600 is really good at. In fact, sometimes it overperforms the latest CPUs in single thread processing. It's just when it comes to multi-thread processing that they've got a lot better recently. So that should be okay, because a lot of games don't use multi-thread as well as they should anyway. So the bottleneck for this at the moment is the GeForce GTX 555 card, which has been outdated massively. So I've purchased a GTX 970, which I'm going to unbox right now, and that's going to be my new graphics card. But in order to use it, I'm going to need to decase this and pop it in a proper tower. So last time I took out the motherboard that was in this and put it in the new tower, which it does work. It's a workaround solution. It's not the ideal solution, but the better solution would be to replace the motherboard as well. So I had to find a motherboard that was relatively good, but still had LGA 1150 support. So 1150 is the socket of my processor. So whenever you're upgrading, you always have to compare your CPU sockets, the type of RAM. There's a lot of comparisons involved, making sure you have the right slots and sockets and whatnot. So I went with the Asus Z87-A, which is a decent card. I grabbed this on eBuyer. As you can see, I got a X display unit, so it was like £20 cheaper than the regular price, because apparently the box was damaged, although I can't really see any damage. To be honest, it's probably what they used as a review unit or something in the past. But the reason I got this one instead of like a £30–40 graphics card motherboard is because this motherboard supports SLI. So I bought the GeForce GTX 970. I got the Gigabyte G1 edition, which I'll show you shortly, because the G70 is very reasonably priced for what you get. If you get the 980, it costs a lot more, and you don't really get that much of an improvement. So I figured if I get a 970 in another year, if I want to upgrade again for cheap again, I'll just buy another 970, bang it in here. I've got SLI set up. That'll give me a bit more of a boost. Since I am sticking with the i7 2600, I am limited to PCIe 2 rather than 3.0, which means that I am going to get a little bit less performance out of my graphics card than I would have otherwise, but it's still going to be an improvement over the GeForce GTX 555 that I've been running for the last two years or so. So this motherboard is a bit of a beast, as you can see. Sorry for the noise. It is massive compared to what's already in the X51, which we'll see very soon. And it has, I don't want to touch it yet because I haven't grounded myself. But it has, you might be able to see, enough slots on there for plenty of PCI stuff and a couple of graphics cards, which is going to be amazing. I'm going to put that away because it's making such a bloody racket. So now let's unbox the new graphics card. I mean, it just came this morning. I haven't even pierced the main box yet. Always have a handy knife on the go. You can't beat a Leatherman wave, by the way. This thing has saved my life so many times. Not literally. I don't live in the ghetto. Okay, we're in. This massive box just for this little beauty. Okay, here we go. So the reason I got the G1 edition, the G1 Gaming Edition, is because this is the most powerful GTX 970 on the market at the moment, and this outperforms anything else. People can say yes, you can buy a cheaper one like a Zotac, or you can go with Asus or MSI. Yes, you can, and you can overclock them, and you can probably reach the speeds of this, but then if you overclock this, you can still outperform those. So I'm not going to overclock this. I really am not. I don't like risking breaking it, to be honest. But if it starts to get a bit slow, maybe in a few months, like in a year or so, then I might be tempted to risk it and see if I can squeeze some extra performance out of it before I buy another one and SLI them up. So this box isn't sealed, which is not impressive because this isn't an X display. This should be brand new. And if it's not, I'm not going to be happy with eBuyer. I mean, you can purchase these from other suppliers, by the way. I know I've mentioned them a couple of times, but yeah, this does. I mean, there is a bit of tape on here, but this doesn't seem sealed to me. It seems like it's been opened before. I don't like that. But if I pull this out without touching any of the components, yeah, it's all sealed off anyway, that's fine. Yeah, so this is, again, a beast. There's no way on earth this would fit in an Alienware X51. You can get smaller GTX 970s. I've seen one about half the size of this that would probably fit in the case, but then you have power consumption issues and heat issues, which is something I don't want to face. On the front here, we've got two DVI-Ds. It looks like 3 HDMIs and 1 DisplayPort, or is it the other way around? Yeah, it's 1 HDMI and 3 DisplayPorts, which is interesting. I don't use DisplayPort. I don't know anyone who does actually use DisplayPort, but it seems to be very popular with cards. I have a 3 monitor setup. I use HDMI or DVI on them. I prefer DVI-D, but I've got 2 DVIs and 1 HDMI, so I should be okay for that setup. You can see the SLI ports, the power, everything is good to go. 3 big fans. Yes, let's get this bad boy set up. Right, so the first thing we're going to have to do is obviously open up the case. Again with a trusty leatherman here. There should be 1 screw on each side, I believe. This side's been long taken off. I'll take the light off, it's a bit better. Right, pop off this side. Right, the first thing you've got to remember not to forget is the case power for the lighting on the side of the case. Right, so there we have the innards. Oh my gosh, I forgot how small this was. So compact. Right, usually you would have a optical disk drive here, but as you can see, I replaced mine with a SSD card a long time ago. Here's the main graphics card. We've got the CPU fan here. And of course the PSU is external. Right, so what we're going to do now is open everything up. Okay, so most importantly, we have to remember where all the screws are. There really aren't many. that should be. Yep, there you go. Remember, power. Excuse any dust, this computer hasn't been opened in a couple of years. So there we have the graphics card removed. Get that out of the way. Okay, now we can see the main hard drive, which I am going to need to take out because I'm going to keep the data that's on there. There's a screw right down here. And the whole thing should slide out like a tray. There we go. The connectors are part of the case. So put the hard drive aside somewhere. Okay, I am going to need my optical drive too. I mean my SSD, sorry, too. There you go. Oh, a bit scratched up. This is the bad boy that I have Windows on. Windows always boots faster from an SSD. And maybe on my primary game will be on the SSD. Load of power adapters that I used again for the SSD because there weren't enough power adapters in the case, so I had to get a splitter. Right, and this time, as I'm not taking the motherboard with me into the new case, I don't need to undo most of this as I did before. All I'm going to need is maybe a couple of the SATA cables, and I'm going to need to take out the central processing unit. I've discovered a problem. I don't actually have, oh yes I do. I was just thinking if I have a new fan for the CPU for the new case. I do have one in the case, look. As you see, this fan is not very transferable. Okay, now that that's all loosened up, I don't need to remove it just yet because I have nowhere to put it. So I need to get the new case set up now. So again, I'm going with the Fractal Design R4, which is the case I used before for the previous mod. So this bad boy is a lot easier to get into. It's just got a couple of thumb screws, although they're not the ones that stay in the case, which would be nicer. Remember, always take the case off gently because you never know if you've got any cables attached or stuck to the side of the case. Right, inside this one I do already have a PC from a previous convert, which I'm going to take out and then put in the new motherboard. So I'll be right back with this. Right, so here we have the empty case. I do have the modular power supply installed, and I've got a little USB adapter there. But everything else is just like fans, power supply cables, power switch cables, all there ready to be connected to the motherboard. First thing, the most important thing is check your motherboard spacing. Find out where you need to put your gold plugs. This is where your screws are going to go in through the motherboard to make sure the motherboard is secure on the unit. Also make sure any fans you've got, make sure the cables are out of the way. Everything is good to go. Here's the hard drive bay, which is really simple. Once you have a hard drive attached to one of the shelves, it's just a case of slotting that in there. I already have a SATA on, but yeah, that's how neat it would look otherwise. And then plunk another one in, full size hard drive. Plunk that in there, sorted. Alright, so next step is to get the motherboard in place. Okay, so here we have the motherboard installed. Everything's in place, it's ready now for the processor and the RAM to go in. I have everything to be connected. I want to get the processor and RAM installed before I install the motherboard, before I install the graphics card as well.